you all for being here. Welcome to the Global Center for Climate Action Speaker Series. I'm Kima Batavia. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm part of the team that's bringing the center to life here at OCAD. So for those of you who are not familiar with the center, we are a new research creation hub here at OCAD University. We're nurturing a community of artists, designers, scholars, activists, and community leaders to consider how artistic practice, creative process, and sustainable design are critical interventions to climate action. So we believe that solutions to the climate crisis are not just technical and scientific, but also cultural, because they pave the path for us to imagine new ways of being and living together. So our intention for the coming months and years is to stimulate and support new interdisciplinary research on climate action, to catalyze public dialogue on the role of art and design in climate action, and to open a cultural space at the Canada Multi-Silos in 2025 for exhibition and community engagement. These are some of the fine folks at OCAD who are stewarding the center. We have Dr. Ian Clark here, who is the Associate Director, Dr. Sarita and Nicholas, and some other folks. But then we also have OCAD faculty who have signed up to become research associates as part of the center and who will be really shaping the center in the coming weeks and months. This fall, we are presenting a 5-part speaker series, and we are also hosting an exhibition at Nuit Blanche in collaboration with the EU delegation to Canada. We're presenting an artist named Amelia Skarnalite from Lithuania, who will be presenting a projection project at the Canada Multi-Silos. So if you plan to go out for Nuit Blanche, please check it out. They are a filmmaker, and their work really explores how we bring together the scientific and the mythological to consider a new force for how we navigate climate crisis. And then these are our upcoming speaker series events, which, thank you so much for being here today. This is our first one, and we have a few coming up, and we'd love to have you there. And today, this is, really excited to share that today marks the launch of the Sustainable Color Lab. So let's give it up for that.
Exciting.
The Sustainable Color Lab is being led by Nicole Collins and Julia Rose Sutherland and Lockie Reed, who's at the back. And it is a new lab dedicated to leading sustainable material research for artists and designers. And you'll hear a lot more from them in the coming weeks. I also want to take a moment for all of us to take a moment and acknowledge that this talk today takes place on the ancestral territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat, who are the original owners and custodians of this land. The GCCA is committed to advocating for Indigenous-led climate action and justice that includes sovereignty, self-determination, and the forefronting of Indigenous knowledge systems. Julia Rose, do you want to?
Yeah, so I wanted to do this before, but Anong, I just wanted to give you a tobacco offering. And I know that you came very far to and you come up here, and we have all this excitement and energy in the room. And I acknowledge it takes a lot. And so I just want to give this offering to give you strength today for sharing everything with us and having us in dialogue, because it's an honor for all of us. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right. So I'm very pleased to introduce Anong Migwans, who has come so far, started driving early this morning, and Nicole Collins, who are going to share a conversation today about their practice in making and using natural pigments. Nicole is a multidisciplinary artist and associate professor in material and visual culture in the drawing and painting program at OCAD, and has a long exhibition history at institutions like the AGO, the Copper Gallery, and the University of Waterloo Art Gallery, to name a few. And Anong is a painter from Manitoulin Island and is part of the Machine First Nations.
Yep.
And their practice is really inspired by history of place, the natural landscape, and the relationship between water and memory. They are the founder of Beam Paints. And actually, I was in New York over the summer, and I saw your paints at the Whitney Museum, which was like so lovely to see. And these paints are made from local pigments and minerals and inspired by the place that they live. So thank you both for making the time to share your story, your wisdom, and your learnings with us today. I'm gonna let you get started and I'm gonna just switch the presentation to have some photos in the background of Anong's practice.
Thank
Take
you.
it away.
Thank you, Hema. Thank you. And thank you everyone for being here. The energy in the room is good. And the topic is good. We're really so excited to finally be launching the lab, which we've been talking about for quite a long time. And in fact, one of the earliest conversations I had was with Anong, who came on as our industrial partner and has been really informing the way that we are going forward with this project. So we're really happy that you could be with us today. I'm going to ask a few questions, just a few, and quickly turn it over to Q&A because, as Anong rightly pointed out, you've all got lots of really driving questions that will, pull forth good stuff. But I will ask a couple just to get us started, to prime the pump a little bit. So
Okay.
happy that you're here. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. I'm going to read a little bit.
Okay.
You are an accomplished artist, an author, a paint maker, a business owner, a community organizer, a family archivist, a teacher, mother, and probably 5 other things that I haven't listed. And I really like to start with place, with the land where you're situated, because it ties right back into the ancestral history. Your family has lived on Michigan First Nations for generations. And I'd like to ask, how does this land and your Ojibwe ancestral heritage impact your art, your work, and your life?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways that I've come to understand as I've grown and traveled more, especially traveling further from home and coming back, that this is one of my paintings here. And where I grew up, where we live, is on a piece of land that our family, we were signatories in a few treaties that founded the area, Robinson Huron, and then the Manitoulin Treaty, where we selected that location. So that's been since 1836 and 1850 respectively. And I'm the current landowner caretaker of that place. And I think when you know yourself in a history like that, you really understand that you're the person for the time. And also growing up and being here, we're on an island in a Great Lakes with 3 bodies of water a stone's throw away. So you're really, really very highly aware of how what you do directly there goes right into this really flowing ecosystem. And you can see that, like, if somebody changes something in their driveway, it changes the water flow of what goes where, and that affects how trees grow and how fields empty. And so you really, I think, very aware of your direct responsibility to the land that you're on and the health of the water.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. You were talking about going further afield, and I was really lucky to be able last year to visit the plant, the factory, the alchemy lab that is Being Paints. And one of the things I saw there that was really interesting and moving was a map of the world that has pins in it for all the locations that you've shipped your paints to globally. Hema was referencing the Whitney. I saw it at the Harvard Art Museums in Cambridge, and I know that you taught a class there recently. So I wonder what strategies that you might have used to get your paints and yourself out into the world.
That's really funny, because like when I went to OCAD, and when I went here was like the early internet days. It was the death of analog photography, and that's mainly what I was studying. And there was just so many massive shifts going on. And in my time growing up on Manitoulin and in the north, my father was a really well-known artist, Carl Beam, and we studied him in school, and a lot of people still do. And he we all grew up, that was that time that if you wanted to be successful or if you wanted to interact at all with the cultural landscape, you had to leave. You couldn't stay there. So he would make lots of regular trips to Toronto and then go back home. And then he'd go to Toronto and then he'd go back home. And it was a lot. It's really taxing. And in the beginning of my career after graduating school and really finding my what I was doing, I did a lot of that traveling out and looking. I was looking for my people I wanted to work with. I was looking for inspiration and studios, and I was working with a lot of different artists. And I traveled to Beijing and Shanghai and Hong Kong. I went to Europe. I was in Iceland and New York, Boston. I lived in New Mexico. Like I went around, and I always came back because I couldn't find something that sustained me in those other places, as much as I appreciated them. And it came to a point later where I went through some personal troubles in my own family life, and I became a single mother. I had two small boys, and I really wanted to reconnect with my upbringing and some of the things I learned with my dad when he was collecting rocks. And I really wanted to get back to that, the joy of interacting with the landscape. So I started doing that. I started doing that with the boys. And this was the age of the internet. You know, the iPhone had been out for a decade. And I had an Instagram account and I started sharing images, and it was just profoundly, I can't underscore how hugely that changed my life, that I could work in a place where, for me as a Indigenous woman, in a single mother, all of my supports and the things that would strengthen me were all in my community. My family was there, my extended family was there, my everything that supported me. So to be able to start a business and to really work creatively from that secure foundation, that's when I really was able to do a lot of work. And it couldn't have happened even 5 or 10 years earlier, because the mechanism to share and communicate with artists in other parts of the world, it just didn't exist. And a really big part, like one of my favorite parts of what we do in the paint business, is working with artists and getting like phone calls or messages from them about a particular problem. I had an art problem, a paint problem. I love those. And somebody will say, I need a copper paint for a performance that could go on the body that we could wear. And like, okay. And doing that kind of work, which, you know, before you would have had to physically go to San Francisco to meet with that artist. And now so much communication can happen in such a lightning fast way.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned your father, Carl Beam, and tomorrow at Gallery Gevic, is that the right way to say it? There will be a launch of a really important book, monograph, I guess, of the work of Carl Beam that you wrote the text for, which is very moving. And also exhibition of paintings that have not been seen before. So are they from your collection? Can you tell us a bit about that?
It's a lot of just paintings that he kept in his collection.
The best paintings.
Flat files and things like that. So maybe they're a little bit more adventurous or a little bit different, but they're really fun and nice works. And that project to write that book about my dad had been something I wanted to do for years, since I worked at Ojibwe Cultural Foundation and before, and it really exists independently as a project I'd been working on, and it's now come out. So it's It's really exciting.
And it's a printed book, but it's also available online.
Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's #1 in Canadian art books right now, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and there's a digital version too, right?
Yeah, it's available free if you go to the website, and there's a link in our Instagram bio that you can go there.
Which is great to share with the students at OCAD to know that this, really precious document is available widely. That's so good. You have a really wonderful relationship with Connected North, which fosters student engagement and enhanced programs. Can you tell us a bit about your relationship with them and with teaching in general, like the idea of sharing knowledge?
Yeah, Connected North is really incredible. It's there's a group called Taking It Global, and they work with Connected North to facilitate arts education in fly-in communities. And these fly-in communities like Resolute, Nunavut up in Iqaluit, and all across the north of Canada, schools there can choose from a menu of classes. And they contacted us kind of with another, like a paint problem. They're like, how can we get art supplies to these really cold, faraway communities? Like, could you come up with, do you have an idea? And we developed a really concentrated card. It's a card about this big, and it has these big pans of a really concentrated watercolor. And we have that in a trio and with gold. So there's a primary, and that goes in a cotton bag with real watercolor paper, not like touristic paper. It behaves like it's professional, and the paints are professional, and one #4 brush. And those kits get stacked en masse in a warehouse that's facilitated by Amazon that they donate to the cause, I guess. And whenever a teacher wants to do intro to art or watercolor or color theory, they can choose, and a kit gets sent to them, a class kit. And then they book a time for their class to receive online instruction with an artist that we've trained in our community, Lindsay Taboski. And she's a good friend of mine, and she loves youth and youth engagement, and she does really wonderful job teaching all of these kids. So I don't even know how many thousands of these we've done, but there has been a really extensive amount of art supplies and arts education directed up into the deep far north, where they can't you can't ship them acrylics. It's really prohibitive. The acrylics can't freeze, so it'd have to be heated transport. The acrylics carry so much water weight, it's really heavy and expensive. So this in a box like this that costs almost nothing for them to ship, we can fit an entire class's worth. And with how concentrated the watercolors are, they get 1 semester's use of art classes out of the one card.
Yeah. And it's an ongoing project, right?
Yeah, it's ongoing.
So we can go online and
you
buy
can.
one and send one and keep it going.
Yeah, we were so impressed. Like it's one of my favorite things that we do. And we listed the kits for sale on our website. So we have that you can buy one for yourself, which is available at a higher price than we charge the schools, but that's to help them too. And then we have a buy one, get one. So you get one and you donate one to a northern student. And that's been really neat because we've had full schools, like Woodstock, an elementary school in Woodstock, bought 100 kits for their classes, and that doubled up, and so they donated 100 kits to up north. It's pretty neat to see.
Yeah, that's a great program.
Yeah.
Awesome. One thing that the Sustainable Color Lab, one of our intentions and intentions is to move towards a plastic-free environment. And so this morning, rushing to get out the door, I forgot my water bottle and I had to buy this. and it made me realize and remember that perfection is not attainable, and that sometimes, we have to. But your company has a really interesting trajectory, the story, your packaging story is super interesting. Can you talk a bit about those early days and how it's evolved?
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting because it made me consider that I thought when I was at OCAD, I should have taken some design. I really would have loved to go back and jump into the design classes because it's become a really, really fun part of what I do. And I really enjoy working in that space of developing and playing with design and packaging for art supplies. And I think early on, I really considered that artists by nature are sensitive people. You have people who are considerate and they're considering their environment. And I would hazard a guess to say that the artistic population is maybe the most interested in climate change and maybe climate aware compared to just a spectrum of general trades. And then when I looked at art supplies that were available en masse, they didn't reflect that sensitivity or those values. So that's really what I was reaching for, was to make something that matched that. And it felt really, when I started making the paints for and sharing them with other people, I bought all this stuff that you're supposed to do. Like you're supposed to put it in this plastic, the half pan, and you're supposed to put the half pans in another thing that wraps them up, like Winsor and Newton, right? Like all the classics. And then I was thinking, like, classic to what? Like classic since when? And it's classic since the 50s. It's not really like an unbreakable forever rule. And how did we do it before? And, it's modern. The modern engine of commerce really likes to forget how recently that was that we made everything to last, and how all the different cultures have different approaches to carrying your water and carrying your lunch and wrapping your paint. And even looking back into the British tradition of watercolor, there's a beautiful palette by Turner, and it's a leather case, and you can see that he made his own watercolors into little pans and put them in this beautiful leather case. And we do actually once in a while a limited edition of a palette we call the Turner, and it's leather made by a lady's business in Hamilton, Tundra Leather. So she hand makes it and she stamps them out with a dye, and then we have watercolor cakes that go into it.
Nice. And then there's also the paint stones. I remember the very first paints I bought from you were like these standalone little beautiful pebbles. I don't know if anybody else had these. And I for my palette, I used a discarded plastic egg carton, which again, but each little thing held the paints and it was quite effective. But subsequently, you developed a different method for wrapping them.
Yeah, it was certain ways of folding waxed canvas, and that's been really fun too, looking at different ways to use materials that were at hand. It's not exactly local, but it is local beeswax and the canvas. So that's been really interesting. Actually, we just we have a case that we make that is pretty unique, and seeing as I was so interested in packaging early, we filed for a patent, and we've just awarded our first patent, not pending, but granted.
Amazing. For that?
Yeah, for the industrial design of a travel case to hold watercolor.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah. It's like that one.
Congratulations. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
That's another thing, is it's beautiful packaging too. It feels warm. You can feel the hands of the people who made it when you're, in contact with it. So it's really beautiful.
It's been interesting too, like when you use mass directed packaging or like mass available packaging, you're getting a packaging where it's subsidized through the cheap foreign labor.
Yeah.
It's subsidized by inequities that are invisible at the point of purchase, but the further you trace back the source of the material, there's imbalances there. And what I really enjoy about our process is we're one of the few paint makers that we are right from rocks and raw materials straight through. We also manufacture all of our packaging. So the manufacture of the paint and the manufacture of the packaging, and to be doing all of that in-house, in shop, it could, you would never imagine to design it that way because it would seem like building on too many problems. But actually being in that makes us very responsive to customer needs, to shortages, to all kinds of things, and all the while able to be responsive to our workforce, which has really grown to include a lot of community members, and
Yes.
something I'm super proud of too.
Yeah, the community there is really profound, and you've got people packaging, making making, and you've got people making things at home and then bringing them in. Like sometimes they're with you in the shop, and sometimes they're elsewhere.
Yeah, I think when I was at the particularly vulnerable point in my life, after school, but before this, it was really hard, the labor shortage, the labor, like there wasn't work for me. And there was work for like maybe people who were capable of going into heavy machinery or going into extractive resource, going into logging or gravel or things like that, or going into, school and doctors, and that's all like very high barrier to entry with education. So I didn't fit in any of those things. And I really wanted to make employment options for people that met them where they were instead of asking them to come to me. So we have people who work full time with us. We do a modified 4-day work week, which is 9 to 3, so that everyone can be home, pick up their kids from school and be present as parents, and start after they've got their kids to school and have been present as parents. And we also do a piecework program that I'm super proud of, where all of the individual paints go into these boards that are made out of pine that we make ourselves. And women can come into the shop and pick up a thing, and it has it's $50, and they take it, and it doesn't matter if they do it. It takes about 2 hours to do, so it's $25 an hour, which is above living wage.
Yeah.
And they can bring it in 2 hours later, and we pay them directly with e-transfer, or sometimes they take 2 weeks. Like, it really depends. Sometimes somebody's got to fix their brakes and they need, like, I need 6 boards right now. Okay. And then they take 6 boards, and what I hear mostly is that I see them done at kitchen tables with women and their sisters or their moms or grandmas and their kids and people around, and so folds them and so wraps them, and they do that. Sometimes somebody's in an emergency and they'll do 10 or 30 in like gotta get something done. And it's been really, really neat to see that grow and be a really a strength of our business.
Yeah, it shows in the final product. I believe that love and care comes with it when people get the paints. It's in the studio with them as well. You talked about the making of the paints, and we haven't talked. That's the last thing I'll really like kind of dig into, and then open it to the floor, because the color lab is definitely inspired by artists making color. And it's a labor that is invisible, I think, a lot. When we go to galleries, we see the final work, but we don't necessarily see all the steps that happen in advance. At the same time, most artists go to the art supply store and, purchase pre-made things, and sometimes there are some of those companies are ethical in the way they think about materials, and some of them aren't. So we wanted to give a space to privilege and expand upon and collaborate around this material color making. And I know for me, for sure, the excitement of making paint really infuses the creativity of making the work as well. Like they're interrelated. So maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the early paint making and pigment gathering stories that you have, and maybe also how it relates to your artwork that you're making as well.
Yeah, so this is the part where I could talk for hours.
We have at least 45 minutes.
I could talk for a really long time, but I'll keep it brief with a nutshell, and then you can ask anywhere
Yeah.
you want to know more. But I think there's a few points that are super important to me about this. And one is I come from a family of artists. I was raised around all the art supplies, going to Stevenson's, seeing watercolor paint, and all of this. My dad worked in silver gelatin photography and etching and painting and watercolor ceramics, all the stuff. And my dad passed away early at 62. My mom developed Alzheimer's and she passed away. They both suffered what I think a lot of people who are privileged to have a long lifetime in the arts you will know somebody who has suffered a debilitating something, or you've heard stories about people who have. And I know that it's referenced in art school, but I don't feel like I feel like I'm not sure what it's like now. That's like a long time ago that I was here. It's important that we understand what our materials are. It's important that we understand that the companies that make art supply materials are not really obligated to tell us what's in them. And it's important to understand that there can be heavy metals in art supplies that don't have certifications. And one of the things I was the most proud of to do early on was to join the Art and Creative Materials Institute. That's the ACMI. When you buy art supplies and you see that AP sticker at ACMI AP, that means that a third-party toxicologist took those paints, took physical samples, they tested them independently, and they certify that there are no heavy metals in that. They certify that there's no lead or cadmium, and they certify that if it was accidentally ingested by a child, there would be zero, not even stomach upset. They are so strict. That certification is 3 times higher than Health Canada's certification for paints. And in my journey of exploring the broad spectrum of paint additives, paint ingredients, available things to make paint from, I would exercise caution. I would exercise caution with industrial paints, with house paints, even the things that are marketed as eco-friendly. It's not something that you want on your skin. You don't want to be breathing them and you don't want to be ingesting or eating them. And that's kind of when we first started, our motto was kind of tongue in cheek, but it was meant to engage your sensibility. It was be safe, don't eat the paint. And you know, rocks not good to go in your eyes, even if it's a healthy paint, even if it's an eco-friendly paint. And one story that really landed on me was a woman who wanted to work with natural materials. She wanted to be really eco-friendly, and she wanted to I think in the wider world, in the wider Western world especially, there's a feeling of like Mother Earth, so benign, so gentle, so, you know. And I think that that's something that in Indigenous storytelling and lore, there's like a level, like not fear, but there's like a respect is really taught, because there's so much power there. And especially when you're talking about color, the most powerful colors that occur naturally in the world are the most toxic. The cadmiums, leads, cobalts, they're all natural colors. And that's something that's really, I see so much with our business, is how much very well-meaning, very conscientious people want to paint with natural materials because they want something that's healthy and safe. And those don't exactly line up when you're searching for vivid, enduring, light, fast colors. So along with our joining ACMI, along with investigating natural pigments, earth pigments, we test rigorously. Even the things that I dig myself, they have gone off to be tested. They're tested for asbestos, which is common in certain earth pigments. And yeah, so that's how I feel about that.
That's the short answer.
That's a short answer.
Now
That's a
you can-
nutshell.
You can pull out the long answers. Let's turn it to the floor. And does anyone have a question? I know you do. I mean, I have 20 more, but I'd like to hear yours. Sometimes people
Okay,
just.
so then I'll tell you about some other stuff, unless you saw one there. No.
No, I didn't see a
Okay.
hand, but put your hand
Okay.
up when you're ready and we'll get it in there.
Yeah. So, oh, what is the most interesting thing I've made paint out of? I'm glad you asked.
That's right. She's prepared.
I have made a beautiful paint. There's a classic paint called Bone Black, and it's often made out of charred carbonized cow bones. And I had a chance to make Bone Black in the winter, and it was kind of just this, oh, I'm going to see what I'm going to do with moose antler. And, you know, antler, it's bone-like. It's not exactly, but it's in there. And I started on this adventure. I go to the hardware store in my very small town, and luckily they're used to me and they were used to my dad before, like getting weird stuff and not really doing what you're supposed to do with whatever it was. And so I get a lot of credit, thankfully. And I'm in the hardware spot. I'm like asking the guy, I need a pipe, like a steel pipe. And then he's like, okay, here you go. And I was like, I need a cap for one end, and then I need a cap for the other end, because I was going to carbonize this and I put it in a furnace. And he looks at me and he says, why are you building a pipe bomb? So I was, oh my God, oh yeah, no, I'm not doing that. And so he let me go with all my stuff. I'm making charcoal. Okay. And I cut up these antler pieces and we put them in the pipe, and we put the pipe in the furnace and carbonized them, and they were so cool. They came out black. Just they were exactly the same as before, completely carbonized, and then we crushed them and turned them into watercolor paint. And it was right around the time of the amazing Dana Danger Canadian art cover with the big rack of antlers. So I don't know if you saw. And her work was so amazing, and we posted that paint up on Instagram. And I think it was this hashtag, like, if somebody doesn't buy this and gift it to Dana Danger for Christmas, the world's a cruel, cruel place. And it ended up being us, and we made it and we sent it to her for her practice. And it was carbonized antler paint in a birch disc, and it was really cool. Yeah. One of the paints too that you see kind of flying by in the background was a fox grape paint that we did. That was really neat because I did that in the kitchen with my boys, and that was kind of in my earlier days too. It's a lake pigment, so it's not really it's not a mineral pigment, it's not a forever pigment, but it's a pretty good one. And the fruit and the juice of the fruit is dyed onto a limestone, and this incredible pH shift happens because the juice is so acidic, it's so vivid, it's like bright magenta. And then you put it in with the limestone, which is really base, and the acid and the base mix. And I had passed the phone to my son, and I'm in the kitchen because I did a lot of the early stuff in the kitchen where you do. And he has the camera and he's filming it, and I'm talking about it, and it's happening. And then it's reacting and it's reacting, and then, oh crap, it's overreacting and it's coming over the jar and down my hands. And then you hear my son's voice on the film say, that's why you're supposed to wear gloves. Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Thanks.
Oh, okay.
Here.
Got it? I think I made a really beautiful sumac ink, and I think that's really neat because it starts out like sumac is it's pH sensitive and it's temperature sensitive. So if you handle it cold, you get this vivid pink that is just like a madder, like rose madder genuine or those colors. And then if you heat it, you end up going into, you activate all the tannins in it and it goes into this deep tea. Oh, somebody's phone was gonna go, it was mine. Okay, sorry
You're
about that.
forgiven.
Yeah, it activates these tannins and it brings up a deep tea color. It gets really red brown. And then it's, if you've ever tried out like the edible sumac, it's so lemon. It's really like you pick it and your hands are just lemony, and you can make like a lemonade with it. So we put in a limestone and you do a pH shift and it shifts to this gorgeous silver color. It's like sage, silver, green, really pretty.
Amazing. Is the limestone like calcium carbonate? Is it a powder form?
Yeah, it's actually dolomite.
Dolomite.
And that's just specific to Manitoulin. And the beautiful, thank God, you know, I was born and put on an island that makes great paint base. And my great fun really is to travel out with my boyfriend's first date with me was to a quarry. Like, do you want to go see this quarry? Yeah, I do. It's
Good date.
yeah, so we go, he works in industry and with a lot of heavy machinery, and his family works in that too. So we have a lot of connections with Indigenous industry that works in forestry and gravel operations. So everybody on the island knows if they see something interesting that, oh, did you see that? And I'll have people like these really big rough and tumble kind of guys who are like, look at that. I found this over here, or I've got that over there. And then I get to go really neat spots and be out in the nature looking at rocks. It's awesome.
Sounds awesome. Yeah, there's a question there.
The like short quippy question is what's your favorite color? So
Yeah.
I have to do my love both like this girl and like science of color, and then I love how he then has like these really deep emotional like connections and reactions to it. And the short question is maybe something I think of asking children.
Mhm.
Maybe they have like a favorite color at the moment, and then but no one asked it though, like they're not part of it, they may struggle and like lose that connection. So I guess like good to look at it and often so much of that and action about it.
Yeah, that's a neat question. My dad, I remember he had an answer for that was he'd say, I'm an artist. I can't afford to have a favorite. And that was kind of like copying out a bit because he did have favorite colors. I really like, I think different colors remind me of different people. Like I'm really fond of alizarin crimson rose madder genuine because that was my mom's favorite color. And she had that color from all the different makers who made that. And I've made that in the past for kind of in homage to her. And I do love the pinks of that. But I think my personal favorite color is probably chartreuse spring green. And part of that goes to what you said about an emotional connection, that it's one of my earliest memories is standing in a driveway with my mom asking what that color was. And I'm like looking up at it and the ground was wet and black and this light was coming through the trees and it was super green. And she just points up to it and she says chartreuse. And I thought the word was so beautiful too. And then she leaves and I'm still there, kind of just like looking at it. And then I kind of look around and nobody's there. And I walked over and ate a sprout of the maple tree because I wanted to eat it. I wanted to know it that.
Yeah. In the body, like
Yeah,
to know
yeah.
it in the body.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yes, yes. You can too.
I might have a question very different. I am an art conservator,
Okay.
so my question goes from first time I knew about your paintings, which are lovely and despite being an art conservator. I asked the Canadian Conservation Institute to connect with you.
Okay.
Because I thought it was a very interesting approach for reversible materials. So are the materials what we usually use when we do a touching. And they never told me anything. Did they contact me?
Oh,
I
I don't
do you
think
have
so.
any relation with conservation?
No, I don't, but I have an awful lot of respect for conservation. I think out of like the myriad of people that you could have invited here, and it's funny, the first person who pops to mind is Jason Logan, and he's he's come up to visit, and we've had conversations in the past about the nature of ink and paint and things, and it's he has a totally different view. Right from the beginning, we had such different views that we haven't really worked together much. His view is that ink is alive, and he views the transition and shifting, the ephemeral quality of the ink is what it is. But I was a painter and a painter of paint from painters who was like, I was curating and working in museums and talking to, you know, conservationists. And I couldn't abide that. Like I just could not abide, this isn't gonna last. It's just not okay. And then also Jason, I felt he was coming, I was coming from going into manufacturing art supplies as an Indigenous woman. And there's a lot of things stacked my way that what you're doing is substandard. What you're doing is not, oh, look at you. How that's cute. It can't be long lasting or substantial because you're doing it. And it's really funny because I have like as a manufacturer, I'm sourcing materials from everywhere. I am locally digging pigments. I am refining and crushing rocks. I am also sourcing pigments from South Korea, from Germany, from places. And one of my suppliers is a German pigment company. And it's really funny to me how the people who have those concerns of, oh, well, is it good? Is it long lasting? I can tell them, oh, I have a German supplier. And then they'll say, oh, okay. So, make of that what you will. But that's something that's where I was coming from, that supplying pigments or making paints that didn't cut the mustard as far as serious light fastness and quality was just not an option for me. And I have done in the past more small runs of rose madder, different inks, plant-based inks. And I try to label those really that those are what they are. And you have to understand that and be okay with that. So there's a lot involved there. There's colors that you cannot get in a mineral, like Rose Madder Genuine. I made a Rose Madder Genuine alcohol ink. It was maybe the most beautiful thing I've ever made. And it was in a tiny little jar. It was drawn from the roots of the madder plant. And in the jar, it was like yellow. And as it was painted out onto paper and the alcohol evaporated and the madder reacted with the acidity of the paper, it breathed pink, like it went, right in front of your eyes. It was just super beautiful. And, you know, like all matter, paint from matter roots, not forever.
Temporary.
Mhm.
Julia Rose, you have a question?
I mean, I have lots of questions, but I'll just ask, I'm just thinking about like the land. That's a big thing for me too. I'm from Metapanagya and I love color. I'm a natural dyer. I'm
Okay.
using sometimes ephemeral things, sometimes things that last a long time, but then change on you. But I'm really interested in the way that you forage in your relationship to the land, because to me, that's the best part. You know, the best part is like the day that I get to be
Yeah.
outside and I'm like
Yeah.
with people that I love, or even just about myself. So I just want to hear more about your foraging practice.
Yeah, and that's really good to bring up too, because I think there is so much attention on that, on going out searching natural color. And again, I would really recommend Jason Logan's book. He's got that great book, Make Ink, and there's a lot about urban foraging and things in there too, and foraging anywhere. For me specifically, like, and I think I just learned this from my dad because it's like a convenience thing. You don't just go out into nature and just start digging a hole because you have no idea what's in there. It like natural color and natural rock becomes most apparent at sites of intrude and heavy industry where a building is being built, an excavation is happening, and excavation is revealing an 8-foot drop of the sandwich of the earth at that space. And those to me are clean, and you're taking advantage of a situation that, you know, you're not causing it to happen. And that's really what I look for where we gather things. So I go to sites that are already have been quarries, have been gravel pits, have been sites where, like, there's a lot of clay used in our regular industry. The most clay, I think, is used for lining water retention ponds. So most of that lining, it can't be plastic because it wouldn't endure the way that clay can make a water resisting bed. So that's what I do. Most of the stone that we get is from quarries where they're using diamond saws to cut limestone and dolostone actually. And dolomite, Manitoulin Island is the very northern tip of the Niagara Escarpment. So all the limestone that makes up Niagara Falls runs up the Bruce Peninsula and stops right on Manitoulin, and then it stops and it becomes granite and northern shield north of us. And that dolostone is the sedimentary layer of an ancient inland sea. Like the rock is pre-mammal. There are no animal fossils on the island. It's all that centuries of salt and the inland sea crustaceans, calcium. So it's really high calcium. It is super base, and it also is the perfect thing that you need to make Portland cement. And there's a massive, massive quarry at the end of the island that produces the material for Portland cement, and all of the concrete in the entire world contains some portion of Manitoulin from that quarry because of the perfection of it for that purpose. So what we use is from the filters of these giant machines that are doing that work, and it becomes hazardous for the quarry workers, and they give us the super fines. So it's very, very, very fine rock that would be airborne, and they catch it and give it to us.
That's great. Using everything, right? Things that might not otherwise be used, or
Yeah, or that are it's a problem to them.
yeah, we're artists solve problems.
Yeah, it's a paint problem.
Is that time? Is that right? Oh, you got a question?
Being here. I'm curious, what is like, I guess, what is the climate dialogue happening in your community on Manitoulin Island? And I'm curious, like, how if you're noticing any shifts in the land and how that's impacting how you think about material sourcing. And also if, you know, the way that you've approached the work has kind of shifted the dialogue around how folks might think about climate action differently.
Yeah, I definitely think that we see things like last winter was probably the first winter I didn't go out on the ice at all because it just seemed very unsafe. We had incredibly warm weather in February. We also, in our recipe for watercolor, we have a really stripped down recipe. It really focuses on tree sap binder, gum acacia, and pigments. But we, instead of using surfactants and humectants, we use maple syrup and sap. And we gather that from behind my house. And it's our family's sugar bush, and we've been making maple syrup there for generations. And a lot of that, the parts that's not for family and pancakes, goes to paint. And this was a year that the syrup run was so strange because the trees started running in February and it was way early. And some people tapped and they started making syrup then, and then it stopped. And then it started again. So we held off and we didn't tap until that time that it was running the second time. But it's things like that we definitely do notice shifts, and it definitely affects. We also had a massive die-off in the bee population on Manitoulin. We do get some beeswax locally. The most of it comes from just south of us on the Bruce Peninsula in Kincardine. There's a lot of apiaries there, but everybody noticed that the beeswax that we use in the cloth, there's been 50% to 90% die-off, depending on. And myself, I keep bees and I lost them this winter. So taking a year off to grieve and regroup and maybe try again the next year.
Yeah, sure.
Just to follow up, what do you think, like, you know, artists, designers were thinking about climate action? What questions would you, you know, like tell them to ask, just based on how you're thinking about how you work with materials?
You know, I think the biggest thing that really inspired me was a quote of Buckminster Fuller quote about, and I'm probably gonna butcher it right now, but the basics of it was garbage is a resource that we allow it to disperse because we're ignorant of its value. Something like that. And that resonates, that echoes in my head almost all the time. I think about it all the time. And it really goes through our own process in the shop. And a big part of that too is having kids and them going through school and learning about climate issues, and then being able to have something to tell them, to say, yep, I know, and this is what I'm doing. This is what I can do in my own personal agency of this arena of the business, and then what we do at home. And I'd invite people to investigate their own agency, maybe outside of just your domestic personal choices, but if you are driving a business or there's things that you can look at that we naturally go A, B, C, D in, like, I need to send a letter. I need to go here and get the envelope. I need to put the stamp on it, take it to the mail and drop it off. You might use plastic and other things in that journey. And if you stop and look at it, there's probably alternatives. We've done a lot of that in our shipping. Our creation, production, all the way fulfillment and shipping is all done in our buildings. And it allows us to maintain that. Even the envelope and the packing tape is water activated paper tape. So as far as we can take it, we're taking it. And we're always on the lookout for spots where it pops up and you're like, oh, that's weird. I didn't think it would be there. There it is. And you're trying to find different ways around it.
Yeah. Great. Peter?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for your talk, and it's great to listen to you. I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about, the word sustainability, right? And you've already started to touch on it already. Some things that you just said. Just wonder, like, the sustainability is the popular sustainability, as we know, like, it's very common word.
Mhm.
And I just wondered if you would mind sharing your perspective, what you think sustainability is, and just what you know.
Well, I think it's such a huge topic. There's so many aspects of it, but I enjoy investigating it. I had no idea how creative a business could be, like just how creative the acts in business could be. And it took me a long time to actually really fully exert my opinions and my views in all those different aspects. But from shipping to actually production practices, labor practices, I think having domestic manufacture is something that, when you think about us domestically creating this product from domestic resources, I think also the supply chain, you do have to acknowledge we live in a global world, and we are sending paint all over the world. There's just different aspects to that. So much manufacturing has left North America. I wonder about the long-term sustainability of that, and how possible it is to increase domestic manufacturing in a sensitive way to ecosystems. I'm really interested in how we make paper and things like that. And another thing too is just looking at the total life cycle of what you're bringing in to make your product, and what is the waste. Being able to take offcuts and things and use them as starts of other kinds of products. Also being able to take responsibility, like in North America, we don't really know. If you want to do business in Germany, you have to start a lucid number, and you have to do an account with them, and you are held responsible for how much plastic you ship into their country. And we're really lucky because we don't ship any. So we got our lucid number and we ship whatever we want. We don't worry about it. But if it was your standard bubble pack, DVD, whatever, we would be called to account, and we would have to pay them for their efforts to recycle the plastic we were shipping to Germany. So I think that's something interesting to look at, those kinds of responses to recycling, and the who's responsible for the products and the stuff that's going out.
And I would like to call back to when you were talking about the community of the business too, because I really felt when I was visiting the sustainability of the workplace, it was really profound. You said earlier, it's a 9 to 3 work week. People's lives are taken into consideration. There's diverse ways of people making their work. I really brought that back and have been sitting with it a lot, because it's not common enough yet, but every time a business starts and models that, the potential, exists for it to reach further.
And I think when you make room for people when you meet them where they are, instead of expecting that they're gonna conform to your whatever that thing is, there's a lot of appreciation, and people are really happy to be respected and to be given space to connect with their families, to be paid a living wage in the economy that we're in, to be able to work close to home, to be able to, we've had elderly people work with us, we've had people with disabilities, we've had people in recovery, we've had people who had babies. We've had babies in the shop. There's been jolly jumpers in the shop. There's like dogs in our shop. There are, everybody comes to us how they come, and it makes for a really nice environment. It really does. And that empowers all of those people. They feel respected, and they have helped create the processes and the approaches to materials. Like at this point, I really just kind of am a facilitating person, because everybody has ideas and they share ideas from their unique perspective. And we started a refill program for our pallets. So we had that before. People could send it in and we would refill it, but now we actually manufacture refills. We use the offcuts from our paint things to make the wrappers for the refills. So it's really, really like tightening down and taking no extra resource. And then we had a summer student say, oh, why don't you just let people buy this empty and choose their own colors? We haven't got there yet, but we're going to. And that's, you know, the reflections from people who work in a respected way. It's so valuable. If I was just telling them what to do, 9 o'clock or 8:30, be there and do that until 12, and then it's over, go home, or I don't know, whatever the alternative is, they would not be telling me like, oh, this isn't working, or could we try this, could we do that? So that's,
Yeah, it's profound. Getting close. Oh, yes.
This is in like a different direction, sort of than where you're going, but I think we often think about technology as something that disconnects us. And I think your anecdote about the internet and how it allows you to actually be more connected to the people that you love and to the place that you love was really profound. And so I don't know if that's like a good starting place for like, a question, but I'm curious if you could just like elaborate or like on that idea, on your feelings towards technology, what it's allowed you to be able to do, because it just made me think differently about it than I ever have before.
oh, absolutely. I've seen such a huge effect where we live specifically, and I don't even think that it's really rippled out yet as far like the potential of what we're going to see in the next 10, 20, 30 years, I think is just extraordinary, because we live in a time where a single mother or anybody who is facing like limitations does not have to give everything up and go to the big city to like make it in Manhattan. Like it's just not that kind of world. So that is allowing for the decentralization of production and culture, and that is gonna really, like, when that happens, the way that we've done it, or the way that it makes sense in other industries, I really think we're going to see extraordinary things. I think you see that in the north with food, certain food producers doing the same thing. There's the local, it's not trite, but you know, the local economies, understanding how people who are in there, you know, maybe that the cities are great and the cities will always be centralizations of culture and communication, but the fact that we can also accommodate people at like Nimki Ajbakong up in north of us, who are living on the land and who are really dedicating themselves to language and culture. There's just so much that we are going to be enriched by having this broader ability to communicate that way. And I think on Manitoulin, we're seeing it a lot just in the real estate market, because so many people now have flexibility of work, flexibility of school. There was an employee of mine who had worked full-time with us and finished her bachelor's of Indigenous child welfare. And she did that in Chiang. She did not have to leave to go to school. It was all remote, and it was through Canadian universities and accredited. And she's starting on her master's. It's really, you know, she's too busy to work with us now, but it was really neat to see that happen.
Amazing. Thank you so much for an incredible conversation today and sharing your vision with us and more to come. More
Yes, and
conversations to
thank
come.
you for coming out on
Thank
Friday.
you.
Oh, I brought you guys all samples of paint. Yeah, yeah.
And you get some paint and you get some paint. That's so
Yep.
kind of you. My
Yeah.
goodness.
And it was, I just had some paint for a couple other people. That's Maria Hupfield's paint.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
Thank you
Hey.
so much. On behalf of the day, thank you for your time, your presence. I think we're like all so inspired by your intention, your commitment. Please come back.
yes.
Absolutely.
You're always welcome
absolutely.
here.
We can-
And for everybody else, if you want to stay abreast of what the GCCA is doing and our other speaker series events, you can sign up for our email list using the QR code. Again, we launched this happening on October 5th. We have an artist that we're presenting at Canada Malting Silos, which will be pretty spectacular. And then if you also have any questions or comments or ways you want to get involved, that's also our email address. Thank you. Please take some snacks on the way out. Like, yeah, have an afternoon snack. And,
And if you want to see, I tried to get something for everybody, but I didn't know how many people would be here. So there's a kind of a mystery. Yep.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah,
that's
you can.
that's so nice.
Super
Yeah.
kind.
Feel free if everybody.
Students to the front.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.